So if we bring up the ISO terminal, and when we've initially come into version 2 UCC, we're met with this display here. If we go into our setup for testing, we'll go to plane control. Have our slope, percent, direction, everything's just 0. So we're going to create a completely flat plane initially to test with. Status, our grade is set to off. So we can now close in our diagnostics, we can see that all options are yes until we get to grade toggle button was pressed, and then we have the roll valve and the speed are both not okay to engage auto. So I've just got a basic iGrade screen set up here. If we set our zero offset error to the height we're at now, you'll notice if I go up with my SCV or down with my SCV, you'll notice that this indicator shows that we're further from grade. Grade on. Okay, so now you can see we're below grade by the yellow indicator. If I lift up, you'll see that we go slightly above the grade with that indicator, so I'll get in on that. So we're above grade, move the bucket down, and we move below grade. Okay, so we're definitely showing that we have control there. So if we look now in our diagnostics, you can see that everything is yes, except for our valve is in auto and a speed. So if we start moving, we're now moving. We engage our SCV into detent. It takes about a second, and then the SCV will engage and start controlling automatically to the flat plane that we created. If we manually move our SCV, lift up above the height, you can see that we have a slight amount of green on our indicator showing we're above the grade currently. SCV detent, it takes about a second before the SCV starts to move, and then the SCV will move and we're holding on grade. Okay, we'll go through now and we'll change back to remote control. So return, we get to our initial ISO VT menu that we met with when we open our version 2 app controller. We now go to setup. In our surface, we go to edit, change our mode to remote control. Serial port 1, serial port setup. I'm running 115.200 used by iGrade. I'm enabling NEMA, that sends the communication strings to Terra for control. All of the NEMA messages at a rate of 5 Hz, and that's all that's required to set up our serial port. Hit return again. We now have surface, remote control, and our roll control is auto. That's fine. In our calibrations, SCV thresholds, we have SCV1 set up John Deere proprietary, SCV3 set up for John Deere proprietary. Elevation and cross slope, note that we do not have the option connector on the back of this 9R connected. Calibrated, yes and yes. These are red until you run through the calibration. Now, all I did to clear that calibration and set up the SCVs was just run the extend test, run the retract test. It's a matter of moving forward slowly, clicking the SCV into auto, running the extend test, hitting stop, doing the same on the retract test, hit stop, tells the valve, tells the iGrade that we have ran the test, but I found that the default settings of 0 work perfect on this 9R machine. It can command very fine control without anything else. I had a value in there. If we move forward just slowly, and I'll run the extend test, so you can see in the background the SCV1 is just grey. If I put a value of 10 in there, the valve instantly lights up to say it's calling for load sense. I had it set like that, and I found that the blade was holding consistently maybe 10 or 15 millimeters off grade. The more value you put in here, it just makes the implements start moving faster and faster. So I found John Deere proprietary on an R series hooked into the can. Just leave it at the 0, but you must come in here and run the extend test and retract test just on and off, just so the system thinks that it's calibrated. Okay, the next step is to run the same settings for the cross slope. I did exactly the same thing. If you have your hoses hooked in backwards, or the user wants to run the hoses reversed, you can select reverse output and it'll run with the fingertips backwards. From there, in diagnostics, we just run through. Before we had the third was no and no. That was when I initially set it up. I didn't run those false extend and retract threshold calibrations, and we had no and no for the calibrated value. So you read this as elevation valve selected, yes. Available, yes. Calibrated, yes. And if you have yes, yes, yes all the way through, the ones that you should have set to no is grade toggle button, no, because we haven't hit that grade toggle. The roll valve isn't in auto. If I click SCV3 into auto, you'll see that it comes up as yes. So now both of those valves are back in manual control. You can see they both changed to no. Okay, back to status. So that's fine how that's set up. In our controller setup, so GPS offsets for implement 1, I just ran through. These automatically populate from the machine configuration in the Gen4 command arm. SCV, this is the same setup as what we had before, but we can set which valve that it's looking for. So I've got SCV1 on John Deere proprietary, and then you can run the threshold calibrations here. Okay, so for board settings, serial port 1 is used by iGrade, edit, it's the same setup as we had before. Now, in